NASA located what Luciano described concerning the moon's residence, and structures on the moon. Luciano, of Greek descent, from Samosata, Syria, lived about 120 AD, and he wrote a book titled True History, where he gives us information that would surprise us. He said, "Go in a boat that was blown away by the wind for 7 days and nights, and on the 8th day it reached the moon." So he's talking about modern spaceships that humans use to travel to the moon and back. And then he says he entered a well that had mirrors above it and could see the whole Earth. So obviously this was some kind of advanced technology. We don't have that until now. This is a state-of-the-art telescope that man has not yet built, because with it he saw people on Earth. And he also talks about someone who was the king of the moon, Endymion, who was supposedly taken from the Earth, taken to the moon, and made king of the moon. He describes 3 engine planes, 3-headed flying vultures flying. In other words, these spacecraft had 3 engines. They also had modern binoculars, and that they could see very clearly, and they could wear and look very far away, describing the astronauts in spacesuits that had horns for antennas. Now these images that we have here are American and Soviet images of the moon, and structures on the moon that cannot be explained, because obviously they do not look to be natural formations. For example, this one here looks like a pyramid. This is a NASA image of the far side of the moon, for example. Kindly support my Patreon account, since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. More structures of the far side of the moon. As you can see, these look to be buildings, multi-story buildings. They do not look to be, as we would say, natural formations. So obviously Lucianos, 120 AD, was talking about things that we just now have images of by NASA and other space agencies. Now he says that the force of this venture towards the moon belonged to Phaethon, and because they were people like us humans and the temperature of the moon was high, they had to wear space uniforms to protect themselves from high and low temperatures. In the ancient Indian epics, they referred to a Greek war with the inhabitants of the moon, and specifically state that the leader of the Greek was Hercules. That reason, for what reason did the Indians have in their texts to mention ancient Greeks, especially in the fact that they had some kind of an exchange with inhabitants of the moon? What possible reason would the ancient Indian texts have to refer to this? Before 9560 BC, I believe that Greeks were cosmopolitans, clearly had the ability and technology to travel around the earth. We know what happened about 9560 BC. That's about the time of the Younger Dryas. That's what ancient texts said is the time of the sinking of Atlantis, and somewhere around the Bermuda Triangle, something happened. There was supposed to be a time portal or a stargate where these people were supposed to be coming very swiftly into the earth at that location. But what happened was there was a geological change, some kind of a pole flip or switch, and the continent of Atlantis and some areas of the Bermuda Triangle, this portal, were sunk and lodged underneath the earth mantle. In other words, the geological changes took place. Now, from what we know about Lucianos, what he was writing could have been science fiction. According to Grenwell, true stories, this is what Luciano titled his book, may properly be regarded as science fiction because Lucian often achieves that sense of cognitive estrangement which Darko Suvan defines as a generic distinction of science fiction, that is a depiction of an alternate world, radically unlike our own, but relatable to it in terms of significant knowledge. Okay, he was talking about spaceships, outer space, and structures on the moon. But the thing is, we have images of these structures by NASA and other China and Russia agencies. Anyway, please tell me what you think about this. Could he have been right about colonizing the moon? Now, the novel begins in the plot of Luciano explaining the story. It's not all true, quote unquote, and that everything in it is a complete and utter lie. The narrative begins with Lucian and his fellow travelers journeying out the Pillars of Hercules, blown off course, and they come to an island with a river of wine filled with fish and bears, a marker indicating that Hercules and Dionysus have traveled to this point, and trees that look like women. Shortly after leaving the island, they caught up with a whirlwind, taken to the moon, where they find themselves embroiled in a full-scale war between the King of the Moon and the King of the Sun over colonization of the Morning Star. The Morning Star, what is the Morning Star to them? Venus. So the Morning Star that he refers to is Venus, named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty, the brightest natural object in Earth's night sky after the moon. Okay? Now, both armies, he said, include bizarre hybrid life forms. And the armies of the sun win the war by clouding over the moon and blocking out the sun's light. And then they come to a peace agreement, and Lucian describes life on the moon, how it is different from the life on Earth. He says after returning to Earth, the adventurers are swallowed by a 200-mile-high whale, mile-long whale, in whose belly they discover a variety of fish people against whom they wage war and triumph. And they do away with the whale, starting a bonfire, escaping the by propping its mouth open. And next they encounter a sea of milk, an island of cheese, and the island of the blessing, where then Lucian meets the heroes of the Trojan War, their mythical men and animals, as well as Homer and Pythagoras. And they find sinners being punished, the worst of them being the ones who had written books with lies and fantasies, including Herodotus and Ctesias. And after leaving the island of the blessed, they deliver a letter to Calypso, given to them by Ulysses, explaining that he wishes he had stayed with her so he could have lived eternally. Then they discover a chasm in the ocean, but eventually sail around it, discover a far-off continent deciding to explore it. The book ends abruptly with Lucian stating that their future adventures will be described in the upcoming sequels, a promise which a disappointed scholist described as the biggest lie of all. So, his title of this, called True History, of course, was all science fiction. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. And it still leaves the mystery of how he knew there were what we call these artifacts that look like construction on the moon. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support.